Okay. All right, I'm not using that microphone. Finding Michael O'Connor. Here we go. And like I said, I could actually probably speak an hour on this slide alone. But you can see he was a trained architect. And he obviously had access to the Book of Kells, which was certainly to his benefit, and you wouldn't get anything like the access these days. Now, excuse me. In 2019, I found a file in my father's office. It was a file I hadn't come across. It was a file I hadn't been informed about. And it was an extraordinary revelation to me. Now, what I saw first in this file were these. What you have here is the letter P. Then you had some zoomorphics, and I'm not quite sure what this is, but I'm sure Donnacha McGowan probably knows.
Letter
A. Is it? Okay, well that goes back to that then. I don't see it there, but perhaps that's it. And I had nowhere else to put that particular photograph, so I put it on the very first slide. Anyhow, let's go on. Now, and then we have the letter N, which for a long time I thought was the letter H. And you can see the brilliance of them. They're fantastic in terms of illumination. They use a lot of gold leaf, but they're bright, shiny, and they're almost like they were done yesterday, even though they were done prior to 1969. These particular pieces were probably completed between 65 and 69. They happened to be on the desk when he died. And if we go back here, we can see he died at 55 years old, 1913 to 1969. This is a little bit of a Back to the Future talk. It's certainly been a Back to the Future experience for me, because I found the file in 2019. It deals with works that were prior to 1969, and then finding or discovering works that weren't known can be anything from 1958 to 1968. And you're going back and you're going forward and you're going back and you're going forward, and you're seeing how his work is progressing. And we'll get there. Anyhow, to somebody who wasn't interested in Celtic art, or at least I had certainly known about Celtic art. My father had brought me out on outings. I had seen the Truro stone, but I never took an interest in it. When I saw just the luminosity of these pieces, the first few that I pulled out of the file, I suddenly fell in love. And it is a love story, this whole thing. It's a love story of discovering Celtic art, but it's also a love story of discovering research. Now, I've done my own research in different fields. I never loved it until now, until I've discovered that when perhaps it's just this particular story, but I absolutely love doing the research for this, because it brings me in contact with people who are also unaware of what I'm looking for, but eventually might find it, and they're as delighted as I am. Now, we'll go on to who they are later on in the talk. We have another piece here, and again, Stephen made a mistake, and I hold my hand up for the guts of a year and a half. I had this vertical, and I thought it was a letter P, and I was assured by somebody else that no, it's actually the wrong way around, and it's a letter Z. As you can see clearly, it's a Z. I wasn't looking for that, but if you turn it this way, you get a P, and it almost looks like an L as well. You know, I wasn't quite sure, and I was a little bit too afraid to ask anybody, because you don't want to end up looking stupid, you know. But I tell you, after a year and a half and you're still calling it a P, you end up looking stupid. So now, I don't know how O'Connor did it, but he almost came up with what's the material that shines at night? This type of thing. And it's luminous. And there's a brightness to it and a beautifulness. And it isn't evident on a screen like this. But if you would see a good photograph of it, or see it in reality, you'll appreciate what I'm talking about. Here we have the letter, which is quite obviously an M, and this was my first encounter with O'Connor doing an anthropomorphic figure, which is that fellow up there, and he looks very Book of Kells-like. I don't think O'Connor did as much with this piece in terms of interpretation than he did with other pieces. He certainly did interpretation on this piece, on the Z. I think this is more imitation. You know, I could be proved wrong after this talk, of course. Now, we'll come to another Stephen mistake. This one here, for another year and a half, I assumed was the letter G, and it isn't. It's the letter Q. Now, you have all your different patterns in here. I'm sure Michael Carroll will be well able to tell us all about the key patterns there. And here we have the alphabet. Now, I'm not quite sure it's the Irish alphabet. I have an idea it's the Latin alphabet, or I haven't really gone into much in this, but you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. H, which there's no H in the Irish alphabet, of course, it's a Bualta. H, L, M, N, I think is the O, P, and the Q, which of course looks like a G. I have no idea what this is and have yet to find anybody who does. And then you go on to your R, S, T, U, V, and X and Z, obviously missing a few letters, such as the H-I-J. There's no J in it, you know. There's no Y in it, things like that. So I've yet to determine exactly what alphabet it is. I should know at this stage, but I don't. This is a beautiful piece, and this came out of the file. So if you could imagine picking up this stuff, and the first three photos you see are those letters that we had in the second slide, and then you start to come on to this, you really become taken in. Here we have, and it's not a number 6 or a letter A, which I thought for a long time it was. This is actually what's called ampersand. It's that squiggle that means and. This is an O'Connor version, and I have put in a Book of Kells version just to demonstrate where O'Connor got his influence from, but also to demonstrate how he built upon it. I mean, it's a fabulous piece of work, and it's a wonderful piece of work, but you can see how O'Connor just elaborated everything that he came across. So his whole modus operandi was really interpretation rather than imitation, even though he did take the baseline as what he found in Lindisfarne, Kells, and Durrow. Now, going to give you a little light relief, and unfortunately, due to technical errors, the music that comes with this video is gone, so it's a silent video. So I might put my own music with it. I can either do that or a jig, and I can't do a jig. I can't do music either, but it's a 20-second video. Roll it there, Roisin. Not Roisin, but how are we going there? It was playing earlier. Maybe click it once. Do you want? Hold on. We'll just move on. Now, this is a promotional video from the Kerry Writers Museum for some of these. Why is it stopped? Am I clicking something that I shouldn't be clicking, or are you? Okay. You'll just get an essence of the luminosity here, and to give a little bit of music, diddly-eye, lee-loo, lee-lee-lee-loo. But it was meant to be Bjork playing, but I can't do Bjork. You know, so that's my best impression of Bjork. You can get an idea of how vivid these pieces are. And to my base nature, it certainly appealed. The bright colours, Now, there we go, on to the next slide. Now, I think what are probably the two most important pieces in the file that was found are these, because essentially it demonstrates how he operated, how he came to end up with his pieces of art. Here, particularly, you can see how he coloured one section, went across, coloured another section, came back, went across. You know, you can see it. He didn't just work around in clockwise or anti-clockwise format, and obviously put on his gold leaf before he was finished his colouring. And he went straight from a red ink undercolour to essentially what would be the finished product. Now, I've been told by others that that's unusual, and it might open up a discussion on how it was done in earlier manuscripts. Of course, this was the 1960s. This would have been on his desk when he died. Whatever work he was working on, he literally left and became sick, stopped his work. 3 months later, he had died. So what we're looking at here are probably the last pieces that he had done anything with. You can see where he had pencil here, where he gives just a very rough outline of what he's going to do in there. I suppose it's just a matter of scale, what he can fit in there. They're well worth exhibiting come the exhibit, even though they're unfinished pieces. I think the beauty in them is that they are unfinished. Now, if ever to get somebody hooked into something, sometimes it just needs a few words. And what we have here is a piece of an article, or a section of an article that was written by my father in 1972 in an American journal, and mentions O'Connor. The piece wasn't on O'Connor, but does mention O'Connor. And what we have here is just an example, and it is the letter from Maurice Friedberg to the President of Ireland on his inauguration in '76. And I'm going to explain that. Okay, now let's go first to the letter. There were a number of letters, back and forwards between a man called Maurice Friedberg and my father, because in 1969, when O'Connor died, his wife had given these pieces to Friedberg and my father, Stephen Rynne, and had asked them to do something with them. She didn't know what to do, obviously. And between the two of them, they gave themselves 2 charges from the file. And it's evident from some of the letters between them. I'm not going to display all the letters. But the first charge was to find a home for these pieces. Obviously, they should go somewhere. They're worthy of display, and they need to be somewhere. The second charge was to elevate his work. Michael O'Connor worked, and the bulk of his work was, I suppose, 56 to 68, 69, and he just fell in a crack where there wasn't a lot of public appetite for Celtic art. We were post-Celtic revival. There was an awful lot of third-rate stuff that had come out in the 30s, and I think that dampened the public enthusiasm for the art form. In this article, it is mentioned, and I just want to go through a line or two here. Nonetheless, should Laur na Hasheri ever be bound as a single book, then his illuminated breastplate of St. Patrick and his Eamon de Valera, President of Ireland, could fittingly be incorporated to fill up 2 major gaps in the book. That's an incredibly important line, because at the time, I heard of Laur na Hasheri, and I knew what it was. And the thought that I was handling something that was by a person who was worthy of Laur na Hasheri inclusion in Laur na Hasheri sort of said, there's more out there. And there was more out there. But also, the Eamon de Valera, President of Ireland, a piece I was thinking, well, I've got that alphabet here. I mean, imagine what he did for the President of Ireland if he did the alphabet just for his own benefit. And therefore, there was no turning back. I literally said, I have to now go and find out what this is all about. This was October 2019. My first email to anybody on the subject was 19th of October 2019. I think it was to Michelle Brown, who's not here, but is an expert on Lindisfarne. And I said, Michelle, you remember me from my father? And she did. And I said, any chance you heard of this fellow, what do I do with it? Because within this file, there was no information on O'Connor. There was no telephone number, address where he lived, whether he was married, whether he had children. There was no information anywhere. And there was no Google information, nothing at all out there. There were an awful lot of Michael O'Connors, but nothing on this fellow. Anyhow, so I sunk my teeth into it and I said, right, I'm going to do this. And the date, 19th of October, for my first email is quite important, actually, because I know there was a time frame between when I found this file in early October and the 19th of October when I made my first email on the subject. I'd been Googling for 3 weeks, and 3 weeks prior to the 19th of October 2019, Michael O'Connor's wife had died. Anyway, so I went and I spoke with my mother and I said, Ma'am, this was down in Dad's library. And she said, oh yeah, I heard of Michael O'Connor. She didn't know him. But she said, he did a piece for our wedding. So off she goes off to the wall, comes back with this. And that's quite a magnificent piece. Here you can see Etienne Rynne, August Aideen Lucas. It's a papal blessing for their wedding in 1967. It's a particularly good piece. I don't have the time to show you any more detail than that, unfortunately. And so now we're going to start off in the search for who on earth is Michael O'Connor. 3 weeks of Googling is not a search. I thought it was, but it isn't. And what we have here is, in the previous letters, and the letter to the President of Ireland, Maurice Friedberg had explained that O'Connor was practically unknown, save to a handful of people. And there wasn't much known about him. And Maurice Friedberg thought he was under 45 years of age. And yet Maurice Friedberg had spent 20 years working with him. Didn't know anything about him. But this was the nature of O'Connor. He didn't say a lot about himself. I had found this in another part of the library. And this led to opening a few doors. Actually, it opened the floodgates, to be fair. Because here we have Michael O'Crohor, which is Michael O'Connor, and Brian McMahon, which is Brian McMahon. Well, at least Brian McMahon, who I didn't know anything about at the time, I did Google. I did find out he was a writer. He was from Listowel in County Kerry. And I was well used to making cold calls at this stage. We're used to wild emails to O'Connors, or has anybody heard of this fellow? So I Googled Brian McMahon, found out he had some children who were still alive, and one of them was Owen McMahon, who runs the solicitors down in Limerick. I rang Owen, and I said, Owen, did you ever hear of a guy called Michael O'Connor? And he said, yeah, I think there was a doctor down in Listowel called Michael O'Connor who used to live in what is now the Kerry Writers' Museum. And I said, did he have a son then called Michael O'Connor? Yeah, I think he did. And did he ever collaborate with your father? I think maybe he did. You see, this is the interest that children give in their father's works. They don't necessarily give a lot, So he said, yeah, I think he did. So now I knew where I was talking about. And he did mention that the building where he lived, and is the building that O'Connor was born into, is now the Kerry Writers' Museum. So the first charge from the file is now completed. This is going to be his home. It has to be his home. It's the Kerry Writers' Museum. They have to display, they've got museum status, give it to them. You think the job is done when that happens. But, and he said, that man said, oh, I think I have a programme for an opening of a GA pitch in 1960 down in Listowel that O'Connor did the artwork for. And he says, oh yeah, okay. And he looked it up and he gave me this quote that O'Connor, there's a whole page about the artist, you know, about the artist who did the cover. And this is all Michael O'Connor gave them. I had the good fortune to be born in Listowel, and that, I think about, covers everything. Anything after that is anticlimax. Now, if you try and find a man called Michael O'Connor, and that's as much information as he's given out, I mean, I didn't like his use of the word anticlimax either. I mean, he had a few children. But here we go. Then that opened the floodgates, because then I discovered he did have children, and 2 of them are alive. One of them is here tonight, Father Brendan O'Connor. Father Brendan was keeping his family heirloom, which is called the breastplate of St. Patrick's. It's the original of the copy that's now being given to the St. Patrick's Centre, and it is arguably the magnum opus of O'Connor. Arguably, I say. It's a single piece, so you could probably say it is, but I would like to dispute that. We have another video, if we can give it a go, please. No music, again, technical issues. Diddly-eyed, lee-loo-lee-lee-lee-dum. There you go. Well, you see, you have to do something for TikTok. I think the music to this was Kate Bush running up that hill, you know, so. I can't do Kate Bush either, never mind Bjork, so. It looks fantastic. Anyhow, bit of light relief there for you. So that opened up the O'Connor extended clan. And your niece, Father Brendan, has this piece. It's a piece that was commissioned by Truman Limited in Dublin for the Brazen Head, which is one of the oldest pubs in Ireland. I think it's the oldest licensed pub in Ireland. And it was given in, I can't remember what year it was, but it was given. And then there was a large flood in the River Liffey. And this thing was obviously stored on the wall in a basement or somewhere. It got some water damage and a replacement was made. I haven't found the replacement yet, but the one connection that I can find to the Brazen Head is that what's his name? Owen Hand, yes, the former Irish soccer manager, was born into that pub. And the Miss McHugh mentioned here, who was over 90 years of age, she was his grandaunt. So we keep going. These pieces are ancillary pieces that were given by the extended family of the O'Connor family. And then I thought that the collection that was now going to be donated to the Kerry Writers Museum, along with this, along with the breastplate, along with the a version of the last one we saw there, the Brazen Head, that this was a decent collection. And I thought the job was done. But then a fellow from Listowel, Dave O'Sullivan, decided to start looking up the newspapers, and he had this facility, which I didn't have, and the newspapers just brought it all out, to be fair. At the time, we discovered that he had designed signs for the entry into Listowel. This is a particularly interesting story. I don't know if any of you have heard of Blind Boy Boathouse, but I'm sure a few of you have. This is where O'Connor was commissioned to design the carpet for the VIP lounge in Shannon Airport. In 1990, it was being thrown out. And Blind Boy Boathouse's father had saved it from the skip, brought it home and relayed it in his front sitting room. Now, Blind Boy Boathouse runs a podcast with 250,000 people listening, and he wears a plastic bag over his head. So, you know, it's... Here is a piece I'm still looking for. It's a version of Public Nahair, and it was for the 1966 commemorations of the 1916 Rising. And here's where the Jewish community in Ireland are handing De Valera what's called the Book of Honour. And it brings back to the article that my father did in 1972 and misnamed what I was looking for. He called it Eamon De Valera, President of Ireland. not the Book of Honour. So I was looking for this piece that was a one-off piece called Eamon de Valera, President of Ireland. Didn't exist, will never exist. Now, we'll get on to the Book of Honour in a minute. This is another piece of a newspaper clipping that opened up information on what this was. We hadn't worked out what it was. We understood it was Libris and donor and all sorts of things. But this is a book plate that was commissioned by Eamon de Valera himself. It was put into a book by Sir William Rowan Hamilton called Element of Quaternons, because de Valera was a mathematician. And this is the book plate that's in that book in TCD Library. And the deal was that you put in your book plate, you give a donation, and with the donations they built the new TCD Library at the time in the late 60s. And O'Connor did the original. The original is still in situ in that book, and every other one was a copy of the O'Connor's original. Now, I'm sorry I don't have a better photo of this, but this demonstrates, not particularly well in this photograph, but O'Connor's colouring. Absolutely beautiful, especially this is a blue hue. It's very hard to explain it when it doesn't show it like on the screen as you want to see it. But this was a commission in 1958 given to the Listowel races for a centenary of their Listowel races. And they didn't have a clubhouse at the time, or they didn't have an office. So it was brought home to the chairman's house, put up on the wall, and taken down in 2020 when I found out about it. And we have it now, we have it for display. It's currently in conservation. Now, going back to the de Valera Book of Honour, and there's a theme here that I haven't even mentioned the word, I think. At least I should have mentioned a lot more. The word of discovery. Everything has been, I'm discovering Celtic art. You know, I'm discovering Michael O'Connor, that's one thing. But this thing is a 31-page manuscript that has lain in archives for 50 years and hadn't been taken out once. The archivists knew it was there. They didn't know what it was, but it was there. I discovered it last December. And the word discovery is actually appropriate here, a rediscovery, you know, because people weren't taking it out of archives to have a look at it because it didn't relate to the political life of de Valera. It didn't relate to 1916. It didn't relate to a whole host of things. So nobody's going to go looking for a Celtic manuscript or an illuminated manuscript in de Valera's archives in UCD. It sat there since the early 70s, or the mid-70s. And O'Connor designed it all. You can see here he was an expert calligrapher. I mean, he really was. You know, but going on to the Celtic art, that's an E de V for Eamon de Valera. Here you have, he designed a logo. It's a lovely leather bound in a specially made box, 31 page. I'm not going to go through all 31 pages, but I'm going to give you the important ones. This is the design he came up with. I haven't seen this anywhere before, and nobody has explained to me that it's a copy of anything else. I don't think it is. I think it's an original by himself. I mean, obviously he drew inspiration from somewhere. And he finishes off the book with this particular item. And I think that was perhaps his sign-off, because I found it in a second book. And I'll show you that a little bit later. It's a nice little sign-off. But you can see design and presentation, Maurice Friedberg, and illuminated and calligraphy, Mem A. O'Connor, Dublin, 14. The most important page in that manuscript, I suggest, is this. It's one where you need to trawl over with a magnifying glass to have a look at it, really. You can see, for scale, I've put the pencil there. It's not because I completed the artwork myself, but it just, even from a distance, and even when you don't get to examine the detail, you can appreciate that an awful lot went into that. An awful lot of thought, an awful lot of imagination. The Book of Honour was commissioned on the occasion of the naming of a forest in Israel. 5 minutes? Okay. Now, we go on to a second book that was found. It's called the Golden Book. It was a book that people were given to... they would give contributions and their names would go in it. Okay? O'Connor was commissioned for Liverpool Cathedral to design this book. You can see it's beautiful. I mean, and that there is obviously that there, it's a closure. But you can see he was talented. He knew how to fill a space. And particularly interesting is up around here. It's, you know, he really did fill spaces. And he knew how to. He didn't do that. He didn't do the painting, if you like. But here you have a bit of Michael O'Carroll's key pattern. I don't know if you've seen anything like that before, Michael. And here you have anthropomorphic figures. Now, and there are a few pages in this. This particular, this is Three Candles Press from Cork, who obviously were commissioned in the first place to do it, and they got on to Michael O'Connor. So you have Colm O'Loughlin, who's a very famous, very well-known publisher and owner of Three Candles Press at the time, and is widely published himself, as far as I know. Here you have a lot of key pattern down the side, and a lot of intricate work here. Now, there are other pieces out there that I know exist because they mention them in various places, but I haven't got to finding them yet. There's the Isaac Herzog Book of Honor. Isaac Herzog was the first chief rabbi of Ireland, and the Jewish community commissioned the Book of Honor for him. His son was Chaim Herzog, who's the president of Israel, and his grandson is Isaac Herzog, the current president of Israel. And the only descendant that I can contact to get that book is the president of Israel. And I was told, don't, he's going to be busy. I said, no, he's not. no, he'll take my call. And he did. And I've had multiple contacts with him over the phone, and he's as enthusiastic about finding that Book of Honor as I am. And it's wonderful because he's virtually my assistant now. You know? Anyhow, then you have Robert Briscoe Book of Honor, almost found. I know it's in an attic. It's in the attic of a 90-year-old lady. She hasn't anybody to go up into the attic yet, and I won't offer to do it myself because I don't really know the lady, but she does have nephews and nieces that will come over at some stage, I'm assured. And then there's a Professor Leonard Abrahamson Book of Honor, which if it's anything like the De Valera Book of Honor, it's going to be another magnificent find, but I think we might have found a broken piece of it. And it might have been a case of all pages were cut up to give out to people to put up on their walls. So they're somewhere. The proclamation for 1966 commemorations of the 1916 Rising. I've already dealt with that in the previous thing. Now, he did a prayer scroll for JFK on the visit of JFK to Ireland in 1963. And it was a prayer by Saint Francis that was, "Oh Lord, let me be an instrument of thy faith." In 1967, there was the first visit of Pope Paul VI to America. It was a one-day visit, and it was a one-day visit to the United Nations where he was going to speak on peace. And it was because there was a conflict between India and Pakistan at the time. They were breaking up and Pakistan was being formed. And the Irish government gave him, for the occasion, the same prayer as what JFK was given years earlier. "Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." It was very appropriate. I haven't found it yet because Vatican archives don't like me anymore. I've tried. They said, no. Before Pope Pius II or Pope Pius the whatever, we can't open the archives. Or afterwards, we can't open the archives. But O'Connor did pieces for two popes. He did pieces for presidents. He was commissioned by presidents. He did a piece for AlNasser of Egypt. I haven't yet got on to even thinking about looking for that one. He did Christmas cards by Oriel Press. I'm going to put a shout out for those because they may be around, they may not. The VIP carpet lounge, VIP lounge carpet for Shannon Airport I dealt with, and he did a piece for Lord Ivy for the Guinness bicentennial celebrations. So all his commissions were at the very top, really. And as a result, I'd like to thank the following people. Sorry. Thank you very much. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Mike.